You are now listening to Testimonies with Terry.
All right, everyone. Well, I am here with the author of A Widow's Diary, Grief Hurts, but God Heals, Stephanie Broughton Burkman. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. We go to the same church, and this is the first time we're actually meeting. I've never met you before, and so it's really exciting to just be able to get connected with you screen to screen. In this case, you had reached out asking if I would be interested in reading a copy of your book before it came out and doing an editorial review. And I was super honored that you asked. It was an easy yes for me, and loved, loved your book and just the rawness of it. And man, I know it's going to impact so many people. So I'm excited to get into that and to really just get to hear your whole story here. And again, I always like to start at the beginning. So Stephanie, let's go all the way back. Tell us a little bit about where did you grow up and what was family life like for you as you were growing up?
Mm-hmm. I was born in Fairmont, Minnesota, which is on the southern border of Minnesota, about 3 hours from where I am now. And I have one sister who's about a year and a half older than me. And we were a typical Christian family. I grew up with Christian parents, and I had a really wonderful childhood. My parents were phenomenal. They raised us with strong morals, and I have nothing bad to say about my childhood. I'll just say that I'm very blessed in that way. So
For sure. Yeah. Obviously that's not everyone's story. So it's really cool to hear that. Yeah.
yeah.
No bad experiences that you can recall. I'm curious, one older sister, what was it like being the younger sister? Obviously you weren't that much younger, but still in that role of younger sister. What was that like for you?
It was interesting because we fought constantly. We did not get along at all. But now my sister and I, we love each other so much. It's so funny how distance can grow the heart fonder. Um,
Amen.
so, and her and I think part of that was because we were so close in age and we had a lot of the same interests and hobbies, we were compared a lot to each other. So there was that dynamic of competitiveness between us. So, yeah, I'm very thankful now that we have a better relationship. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, sometimes distance is really all you need with family relationships in order for those relationships to strengthen and to just be better than what they've ever been before. You mentioned some competitiveness there. What did that look like?
well, we were both in orchestra. My sister played violin, I played viola, and our skills with that were compared to each other quite often. I was not the most athletic person compared to my sister, so our athleticism was compared quite a bit. Um, our appearance, obviously, because we do look similar, so in that way we were compared. But um, yeah, I think just tennis was one thing we both enjoyed. Academics, my dad would give us money for each A that we received in school. And so our academics were constantly, we had a lot of pressure with academics growing up. Where we got into college, it's funny because once I became an adult, I realized that was happening. I didn't really know that was happening until I was older. And so I was able to kind of separate myself from that and put an end to it as I became an adult, and I've kind of grown up and grown out of it now. So I think that helped with our relationship quite a bit.
Yeah. What was that like? Feeling like you were constantly being compared, especially even into your teenage years. It seems like every guest I have on this show, we talk about just the difficulties, the awkwardness that comes with being a teenager. And so, you're navigating through all that, and then you're kind of, dealing with the whole comparison thing too, with the grades, athletic ability, musical ability, all those things. What kind of effect did that have on you, Stephanie?
It did not have a good impact. As a child, I didn't realize the kind of impact that it had on me until I got older. I think that it played a part in my insecurities as an adult. Um, I think that it it's something that I struggle with still. My self esteem. It's something that I have to battle. Um, and I don't know if that was part of it, or if it was some parenting. I had great parents, but no one's perfect. I've learned in my adult years that my love language is words of affirmation, and I didn't have a lot of words of affirmation from my father. Not to say anything negative about him, because I love him so much, but I've learned that having that kind of affirmation from your father is super crucial in your self esteem. And then when I'm getting compared with my sister from my parents sometimes, and also extended family, my dad included, it was, I think it has affected my self esteem. So, but I pray daily about it. I pray for my daughter as well, because she doesn't have her father. Um, and I do see sometimes that comes up with her self esteem. So it's one of my top things I pray for, is that God would allow her to see herself through his eyes, and that he would give her the affirmations that she needs with a relationship with him. Mm-hmm.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, Stephanie. I mean, you had great parents, you have great parents, but there's no such thing as a perfect parent, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. Sometimes people think that, oh, you grew up in a Christian home, so everything was just perfect and great. And no, I mean, we're still human beings, even followers of Christ, really close knit families, we all have flaws, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting how that has been kind of a theme throughout your life, and something that, as you said, that still to this day you kind of battle with. I'm curious, what you mentioned praying about it, but other than praying about it, what else kind of helps you turn that stinking thinking around, and helps you see, hey man, no, even though that's how I feel about myself, this is
Mm-hmm.
what the truth actually is. This is what God
Mm-hmm.
thinks about me. This is what my family thinks about me. Like, what kind of helps you get out of that mode of thinking to really come back to the truth of who you are?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that. At my mom's group this year, we read a book about conquering comparison, um, in a culture of comparison, overcoming that inner turmoil of feeling like we're not enough. So, scripture, just meditating on what the Lord says I am. I am a child of God. I think also jealousy of my sister in the past was an issue. My sister has a wonderful career, and she's got a beautiful home, and she's able to travel a lot, which I would love to do. But I think putting myself in a place of being happy for her has helped tremendously. Instead of being jealous, I say verbally, I'm so excited for her. I'm so happy for her that she has that beautiful life. Has really helped me, and also positive affirmations, of course, and meditating on the word.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think that's great advice for anyone, that, to even just kind of get the curb ahead of falling into comparison, bitterness, jealousy, envy, whatever it is. Let's just celebrate that person, right? Let's rejoice with those who rejoice, as the Beatitude says. And so, sometimes a lot of the times it's easier said than done, but it's cool how you are so intentional with that, Stephanie. And as you mentioned, I mean, you grew up always knowing the Lord. And so,
Mhm.
what growing up, what was that like, as far as how did you view God? We all come to this point in our lives where we have to kind of make that relationship with Jesus our own. And so,
Mhm.
growing up in the church, like, what was God to you?
Mm. I can't even remember the day that I gave my life to the Lord, because I always remember just talking to him. I have journals from when I was a little kid, probably 10 or 11, writing out scripture and writing things to the
Oh, wow.
Lord. And he was my friend. He was there. He was always listening. He was my father. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, obviously your book is basically your diary entries, and you just said there, as young as 10 years old, you kept a diary, you kept a a journal. And so what kind of led you to start that in the first place, Stephanie? And was journaling, writing in your diary, was that always kind of one of your main like therapeutic processes, coping skills to just kind of like process through how you were feeling?
Yeah. So what led me to it was after Aaron passed away, I attended Grief Share, which is a local support group. And one of the things that they first told us was that it's incredibly helpful to write a journal, to release your emotions and feelings out there on paper, to get it out. And so my sister actually helped me start the blog. Um, and I posted on there every few days for the first 6 months, and then it kind of tapered. I was done at about a year. But I wanted to do it because I wanted people to also kind of know, I wanted them to know how to talk to somebody who's grieving, because a lot of people don't. And you can have a lot of awkward encounters. And so I thought maybe someday I thought I could use it for a book. I didn't know, but I wanted it to be a resource, not just for me, but also for other people to step into my world. If there was someone else who's struggling, to know that they're not alone in that, because reading someone else's pain can be oddly comforting, I've learned.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And so was writing something that you like did throughout your life, prior even to Aaron passing? Was writing, was journaling something that was just kind of a staple of your life?
Yes, I journaled in spurts throughout my whole life. I would go, sometimes I would journal consistently for a year, and then I would take a year off, and it was very sporadic, but it was something I have done consistently throughout my life. Mostly journaling my scripture study with the Lord and my prayers, and how God has answered my prayers. I like to keep a journal of those things.
Yeah, that's great. Being able to look back at, the prayers that have now turned into testimonies, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things that you dreamed of, prayed for, now becomes a reality. It's always cool. It's always fun to see, the fruit of what we've been praying. And so, kind of where we're at in the story here, Stephanie, is again kind of growing up, had a good childhood, but kind of had to deal with some comparison stuff with your sister. And so, you get to high school graduation. Did you have any clue of what you wanted life to look like after graduation?
You know, I just kind of went along with what people told me I should do. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved spending time with children and I loved working with kids. So I either wanted to do social work or teaching. So I actually went to school for elementary education, and I have a teaching degree. But I honestly thought, well, I'll get a teaching degree. Maybe I'll teach for a few years and then I'll become a mom. And so that's what ended up happening, and I'm totally happy with it. College, I was actually nervous when I went to college, not finding Christian friends. So I was pretty intentional about. There were Facebook groups where you could meet up with other Christian friends from the same school. So I actually met my Aaron's sister on a Facebook group, and she's a Christian, and we became good friends that way. And her and I joined a Bible study group at St. Ben's, which is where I went to school. And that Bible study group was a lifesaver for me. So I had such amazing friends through that, and that's Aaron and I went to that together as well. So it was wonderful.
Awesome, awesome. So God was already kind of connecting the dots there for you. You were, going to school or going to the Bible study at least with his sister. And so let's just kind of get into that part of your story then,
Mm-hmm.
meeting Aaron. So walk us through, how did you guys meet? What were your first impressions of the guy? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. We met when I was 18, a freshman, and I used to work at the cafeteria at St. Ben's. And I remember Kelly came to work and she was like, Kelly is his sister, my friend. She came and said, "Hey, my brother's outside the door here. Do you want to meet him?" And I said, "Sure." So I went outside of the cafeteria and I met him. And I remember thinking that he was very short, but also, but very nice, and he had a big smile on his face, and he was quiet though as well. But he seemed very confident in himself. I remember thinking that. So
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. First impressions. He was short, but he was a nice guy.
Yes.
I love it. And before we carry on with the story here, Stephanie, I want to point out that, you grew up in Fairmount. St. Ben's is quite a ways away from home. And so what led into the decision for you going to college at St. Ben's?
Yeah, that's a good question. A few different things. So, two of my best friends from high school decided to go to St. Ben's, and I wanted to go somewhere where I had friends, obviously. I went on a missions trip to Guatemala when I was 16 through my church, and I loved it. And St. Ben's was one of the only schools that had a study abroad program to Guatemala. So I knew I wanted to go back there. And so I ended up studying abroad in Guatemala for a semester at St. Ben's. Hmm. And I love St. John's. They had a beautiful, St. John's is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Beautiful lakes and walkways and just a gorgeous place. So,
Yeah, very beautiful campus,
yes.
for sure, especially, in this area. And so what was that like for you, moving 2.5, 3 hours away from home, leaving your family, becoming independent? What was that like for you?
Hmm. Well, I feel like I'm a pretty independent person and I'm strong willed, and my parents will tell me that many times. So I was ready. I feel like I just needed to have that separation from my parents. And I had visited St. Ben's and I loved Stearns County. I love the area. I don't know why. I just felt drawn to it. And all the other things with the study abroad and my friends, it just was a no brainer for me. And I had wonderful financial aid as well. So all the things kind of led up to me coming here.
Yep. Yeah, that financial
Um,
aid piece, that's always big, right?
yes.
And so picking back up then, you meet Aaron. How did you go from that interaction to building a friendship to eventually dating the guy?
Hmm. Well, Kelly and Aaron were best friends. They hung out all the time. And so we just hung out, the three of us. And sometimes we would meet up with some of his friends and some more of our friends. And it just became a tight knit group with him there. And our friendship was really strong for a solid 3 years before we started dating. I had no inclination of any relationship with him past a friendship for quite a while. Um, and there was really no thought of it either on his part because he was very respectful of the friendship that Kelly and I had together. So he didn't want to even let that in his mind um, between him and I until he knew that it was okay with Kelly.
Wow,
So
man, it says a lot about
yeah.
him and the kind of guy he was, his character, his integrity. And I am so impressed that you guys, I mean, like you said, you didn't really have intentions of dating, but 3 years of building a friendship. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
most relationships don't start off that way, in our culture, in our society. They're very fast happening, and sometimes that's fine and it works out. A lot of times it's not the greatest thing. You guys had 3 years of really building a foundation, and you weren't even really aware that you were building a foundation at
Yeah,
that time, right? And so
yeah.
how did that then, like you said, you didn't really have any inclination to date him, but obviously that changed. What changed?
Mhm. Um, I think when I was ending my third year of college and I was thinking about graduation, and um, I remember thinking to myself, well, what am I going to do when I graduate? I can't, I, I, I don't want to move away because I don't want to be away from Aaron because I love hanging out with him so much. And most of my other friends were getting jobs across the state or in different states, and um, or planning on doing that at least. And so I just started thinking a little bit more about it, and then I knew what kind of person he was, and he was, Kelly would always say, "I hope that I find a man like my brother because he would be an amazing husband,
Mm,
because of his character." And the more that I thought about it, the more and more I saw that in him, and I knew that it would be hard to find that type of man. So, and I was like, I know him inside and out. I know, I, I know his qualities, and they're exactly what I was looking for. So,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So what was that like then, transitioning from friends to, dating, boyfriend, girlfriend? Was there any awkwardness there, or because you guys had built up such a solid foundation, was it a pretty seamless transition for you guys?
Um, it was pretty easy for the most part. I think there was not much awkwardness because we knew each other so well already. We had so many deep conversations already without the sexual tension, if you will, when you start dating. And that wasn't getting in the way. That didn't get in the way before that. And so I knew who he was. He wasn't faking who he was. Um, I think it was a little tricky with Kelly. She gave him his blessing to ask me out on a date the second semester of senior year. And then when we actually did start dating, it was harder for her, because I don't think she realized the reality of what that would look like because we moved pretty fast. When we started dating, January of 2011, and we got married in August of 2011. So it was pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. But hey, when the Lord's blessing and anointing is on something, yeah, things can happen very fast. My wife and I dated for 3 months, then we got engaged and
Yeah.
married, shortly after. So definitely, had that same experience as you. And yeah, I'm sure that was tough with Kelly. She's used to kind of
Mhm.
the three amigos there, right? Hanging out, and now obviously
Yes.
as your and Aaron's relationship progressed, that just naturally had to look different, right? You guys were going to want more time, just alone and with each other. And so, yeah, you started dating January, and then got married in August. So when did Aaron pop the question?
It's funny because we kind of just decided we were going to get married together. It was a mutual thing. So we had already like decided, well, let's get married at the end of summer. But he never officially like asked me. So, but he did end up proposing to me. I think it was June of 2011.
Okay.
And I knew he was going to do it eventually. So
Yeah. Like,
it was,
had you guys gone like ring shopping together or anything like that beforehand?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I knew it had to come before the end of the summer.
Right. Right. And I'm curious, Stephanie, you obviously were in college getting your degree at the time of just building this relationship with Aaron. What was Aaron up to in life? Was he also in school? Was he working? Like, where was he at in life?
Hmm. So Aaron was 2.5 years older than me. Before I met him, he had gone to the technical college in St. Cloud. He got a mechanical degree, so he was a he could be a car mechanic, but he didn't actually do that. He worked for a scenic sign company in St. Cloud or in Sauk Rapids, and so he installed signs.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I'm familiar
Hmm.
with them. And yeah, I mean, like you said, this thing moves pretty fast. Engaged in June, dating in January, engaged in June, married in August. What was your wedding like, Stephanie?
Hmm. It was so much fun. We had our wedding in my backyard in Fairmont, actually. Um, all of his family came down, and it was a blast. It was people were talking about it for years after. Oh, we loved your wedding. It was the most fun wedding ever. It was low key. It was low budget because I was just out of college. So, but it was so much fun. I feel like those are the most fun weddings.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, some parallels there. So you would have gotten married like right after graduating?
Yes, actually, I had not graduated yet. I had to go an extra semester,
Oh,
so I
okay.
was like a technically a fifth year senior. So I still had some student teaching to do while we were married.
Sure, sure. Yep. Yeah.
Mhm.
My wife and I, we got married probably 3 weeks after I graduated college. And so, it
Okay.
was a whirlwind there of like, okay, graduating, getting, a degree, trying to get like a big boy job, and then getting married on top of all that. And so what was that like for you, Stephanie? Like you said, you had another semester to go yet, but still, you're getting married, you're trying to finish out your degree here. I'm guessing you guys, I don't know if you had to buy a house or what you guys did for that, but like, what did that season of your life look like shortly after getting married?
When I think about my life before kids, I don't feel like it was really that stressful. I had I had a lot of papers to write, and it was like I had a full time job because I was teaching 8 hours a day, and then I had to write papers at in the evenings. But I feel like it was a wonderful time of my life. We really enjoyed our life at that time. We were renting someone else's basement of their house um, for that time. So
Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so you eventually graduate then that following semester. And what does life look like for you post graduation? What kind of comes next in your story?
Mhm. So after graduation, I didn't get a teaching job right away because it was in the middle of the school year. So I found a few random jobs to get me through until the beginning of the next year. I worked for Culver's for a little while. I worked for daycare as a preschool teacher for a little while. And then when the next year rolled around, I was actually a substitute teacher for 3 years. But I really loved that actually. I love subbing.
What did you love about it?
I loved that I could pick the grades and the schools that I wanted to work in. And I got to know a lot of the different teachers and a lot of the different staff from different schools. And I could just go to work and come home and get a paycheck. And I didn't have to do any lesson prepping or emails or paperwork or anything. I could just go to work and come home, and there was no stress after that. So,
Hey, sounds like a good gig
and
to
I got
me.
to work with kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And,
Hmm.
and, like you said earlier on, like you knew that, you wanted to become a mom after a few years of teaching. Obviously you got into teaching because of kids. Like you clearly have a passion for kids. Where did
Hmm.
that come from? Were you someone, as you were growing up, were you the one who was just kind of always the baby magnet and kids just wanted to be around you and you enjoyed babysitting, or where did that all come from?
That's a good question. We really didn't have a lot of kids in my neighborhood, little kids that I babysat or anything. I think it's just something that God put in me. I used to be a lifeguard in high school, so I used to teach swimming lessons, and I really enjoyed that. And I loved hanging out and getting to know kids at the pool. And I used to teach violin lessons to younger kids when I was in orchestra in high school. So I think just those experiences were inspiring to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like, God definitely put you in positions to teach throughout your life. And it sounds like you were good at it and you felt fulfilled at it. And so it makes sense why you chose to get into that profession, for a career. And so, yeah, you're, kind of getting your foot in the door with these different jobs, you're subbing, and then, you're still in your first year of marriage as well. And what stands out to you about that first year of marriage? Stephanie, working as a marriage and family therapist, I hear two different sides of it. I hear that, oh man, that honeymoon season just carried us through that whole year and it was great. I hear, oh man, like that first year, it was really tough because again, we're trying to figure out life together and finances and housing and all that stuff. So what was your and Aaron's first year of marriage like?
Um, like I said, we were friends for a while. And so I don't feel like I had to overcome a lot of hurdles from learning new things about his personality. I remember occasionally we would have an argument if we were working together, like trying to put together a project or assembling furniture or something like that. And it was a learning curve with learning, okay, this person is saying this, but he's not trying to hurt my feelings. I don't need to be so sensitive. And then it was really good for me because he would tell me things like, oh, well, you're being really controlling. You're always trying to tell me I'm doing something wrong. And then it was really good for me to be introspective, like, oh, you're right. I actually do that, don't I? So that was more than just the first year. That was probably the first 3 years of, it was a really great mirror for me to see what I needed to work on as a person myself. And of course, those are things that I still work on today, but we I feel like we just really grew a lot closer during those first 3 years, and I look back on them with joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned being introspective, and that's something that I really picked up on in reading your book, Stephanie, is that you, even in your grief, even in that stage of life, which, we'll obviously talk more in depth about in just a second here, I just really got the impression that you were someone who really values self growth. Like you want to be the best version of yourself. You want to learn. You want to grow, and that's an amazing quality for anyone to
Thank
have.
you.
And again, I'm just getting to know you during this interview. Have you always been that way? Have you always been open to kind of receiving that constructive feedback from people of, hey, I notice you did this, you could make this adjustment. Um, what was that like? Because a lot of people, and again, I work with them. You give them, feedback. You kind of maybe even sometimes call them out on their crap, right? And they don't want to hear it. They get super defensive, and it just doesn't go well.
Mhm.
Where for you, I mean, you seem very open to, yeah, how do I better myself? How do I improve myself? Where do you think that comes from?
Mhm. Good question. I think it's something that's grown in me. I feel like Aaron was the person that pointed out pride in me. I remember like having an argument with him, and one of the things he told me was, "You don't need to get so angry. I'm just pointing out something that maybe you could do better. Why are you getting so angry at me?" And I was like, "Yeah, why? Why am I getting angry?" And I think it was pride. And so I do think that was a point where I was like, okay, I obviously am being really sensitive because I have pride. And where is that pride coming from? Is that something that I learned growing up as a defense mechanism from my sister because we fought so much? So I think just I really pray that God would keep me humble. And I truly want to live my life in a pleasing way to the Lord. And so I try to do things the right way because I know that it ends well if you do things the way that the Lord wants you to do them. So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, that's an awesome quality that you have. And so you guys, get through that first year of marriage. And again, you said like your desire was just to teach a couple years, have some kids, and you said that's what ended up happening. And so when did you have your first child?
So actually, we struggled with infertility for 3 years with my first daughter, Sylvie. So we wanted to have kids younger, but I didn't end up having Sylvie until I was 27. I got married when I was 22 and had her when I was 27.
Yeah. So you mentioned struggling with infertility. And so what did that look like for you guys once you finally did become pregnant? Did you have to, do anything kind of, targeting the infertility? Did you do any type of different like treatments, or how did you end up getting pregnant?
I had to do a bunch of tests, so different procedures trying to find out what was wrong with my body, blood tests, and I had a surgery, a laparoscopy to find out if there's anything wrong. And then after the end of all of that, they figured out that I had PCOS. So then they put me on medication to help me ovulate, and then we did a round of IUI, and then thankfully we were pregnant the first round with that.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Praise
mhm.
God. Praise God. I can't imagine how joyful that was for you. 3 years of infertility, having to do, these procedures and go through these steps to get pregnant. Once you saw the pregnancy test say, positive, you are officially pregnant. What was that moment like for you, Steph?
I just can't even explain it. It was so amazing. It was just wonderful, pure joy, pure excitement. I call her my miracle child.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. And again, being pregnant for the first time, what was pregnancy like for you?
I was sick, pretty sick, the first 12 weeks, I would say. And I had very big babies. She was 9 pounds. So I was pretty uncomfortable for most of the pregnancy.
Yeah, I can
I was
imagine.
ready. I was ready for that to be over.
Right. Yeah. You guys grew them big, huh?
Yeah. My son was 9 pounds, 3 ounces. So
Wow.
even bigger.
Yeah. Wow. That's just your central Minnesota corn-fed children right there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
So you give birth to Sylvie, Stephanie, and you get to hold her for the first time. Man, what was that like for you?
I mean, just beautiful. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, you have children, right? So just a wonderful feeling that you don't ever experience. The love that comes with that is something that I never had before. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
yeah.
it's an amazing gift. And so again, kind of a whole new season for you and Aaron then now stepping into parenthood. And so what was that like, learning how to parent together, figuring out this whole team of raising kids together? What did that look like for you guys with Sylvie?
So when I got pregnant with Sylvia, I was a fifth grade teacher. Got a job for 1 year as a fifth grade teacher, and then I had her at the end of my teaching year, and they were going to transfer me to a school that I didn't want to work at. So that was an easy answer for me to stay home with Sylvie. So I quit teaching at that point, and then I actually became a nanny. So I took care of another little boy for almost 2 years after that point. And then it was just a wonderful time for us. We really loved those first 2 years with Sylvie alone. And Aaron was such a loving father, and he just loved being a dad, and he always called her my little girl. And yeah, it was a really fun and sweet time. Good
That's
memories.
yeah, that's precious. That's precious. And yeah, then you had your son. You had Lad, I believe is his name, right?
Yes.
And I think in the book you might have talked about how you settled on that name, but yeah, tell us, like, obviously it's a unique name. I love it. How did you guys come up with Lad?
That was a name that Aaron picked out. He actually wanted to name him Oli, which is I don't know if it's a Norwegian name. And I absolutely did not want to name him Oli. So I was like, okay, are there any other options here that we can compromise on? And he didn't like any of the names. Like, I had names like Wesley and James and just kind of normal, like manly names, and he heard this name Lad from, I don't know if you watch the Pioneer Woman cooking show, but her husband was named Lad. And he was watching it one day with me, and he thought, "Oh, I love that name, Lad." And I was like, "Really?" I don't know. Lad means manservant.
Oh, does it?
So it does, but that's not a bad thing, I guess. It's a good to be a servant, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I thought, okay, Lad is kind of cute. You can't shorten it and make it more weird. So we went with Lad. We actually didn't decide on it until after I gave birth. And after I gave birth, I still didn't want to name him Lad. But I was like, okay, we're going to have to, because Aaron wasn't giving in to anything I wanted. So,
And now, all these years later, you probably can't even imagine him being named anything different.
right. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely grown on me, and I love his name now. It's very unique and cute. So,
Yep. Yeah. I
yeah.
love it. I think it's a really cool name. And so, yeah,
Thank you.
now you're a family of four, it's you two
Mhm.
and the two kids. And so what did life look like then? Were there any big changes, any big, just kind of things that you guys had to do differently now having two kids?
So yes, when I told the family that I was working for, I was nannying for, that I was pregnant with Lad, they just didn't really think it would work out too well with me nannying for them anymore. So I got a job online as a English as a second language teacher. I taught Chinese students how to speak English online, and so I did that the early hours of the mornings, like 4:30 or 4 in the morning. I would get up and I would teach classes up until Aaron left for work, and he would leave pretty early, around 6. But I did get quite a few clients, and I did enjoy it. Um, if I could get somewhat of a decent night's sleep, that is, it was hard for the trying to wake up early. I'm not a morning person, so it was really hard to pretend that that I was excited to be there half the time. But I did enjoy getting to know the students, and it was just a really strange schedule trying to, and sometimes Aaron would leave for work, and then the kids would be sleeping, and I would just hope and pray that they wouldn't wake up until my class was over. And so it was kind of stressful with that. And I did that for a couple of years. And then so Lad was born in 2018, and so Aaron would always tell me he wanted to be a farmer, and I always knew that when I married him. His dad is a farmer, he farms cattle. So he said, when I turn 30, I'm going to make the decision, am I going to stay at the sign shop, or am I going to become a farmer with my dad? And I knew that that dream would never stop for him. And I knew that it was something that he desired so strongly. So when he turned 30, it was like, well, what are we going to do? So then his dad actually had a friend who was selling land up by where he lives, 77 acres of land. we went in on the purchase of that land with his dad. Um, I think, no, that was 2017. And then, so that was before Lad was born. So then when Lad was 6 months old, we ended up selling our house and moving in with his mom. So that was kind of a stressful time of making that transition of when Lad was a baby. So that's kind of hard.
Yeah, yeah. I don't imagine many couples in their late 20s, early 30s wanting to go back living with their parents, right?
Right.
Let alone with two young children. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, where was this land that you guys bought? Was it close by to where you guys were already at, or was it further away?
So his dad lives in Verndale, Minnesota. It was in Hewitt, Minnesota, which is only a 10-minute drive from his dad's.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yeah, you guys pack up the family, you go and live with his mom and, his family. And as we already talked about, that stressful. Kind of walk us through what was that like, adjusting to living with his
Mhm.
family now.
Yeah. His family is great. And I mean, his mom loves her grandkids. Her name's Pam. She loves the grandkids. And she was overjoyed to have us there, I think. It was an adjustment, but her and I were already really good friends. And Mike, his stepdad, like we all just get along really well. The hard part was for me, we built a cabin on the property up there. And so we were up there every single weekend, and it was like camping. So every Friday, I had to pack up all of our stuff, food, um, clothing, everything. There was no running water, no bathroom. So it was rough having two little kids up there in this little cabin. And then Aaron is working with his dad farming, and I'm in this little cabin up there, and I don't know anybody. That was the most stressful part. And then I was still teaching online, so I would teach in this little cabin while they're sleeping downstairs at the bottom of the cabin. I'm upstairs in the loft at 4 in the morning, and I'm connecting to my hotspot trying to teach lessons to kids in China. It was crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, you mentioned a
Yeah.
pioneer show earlier in the interview, and kind of sounds like you guys were kind of living the pioneer lifestyle there for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We were trying to save money to it was Aaron's dream to be debt free and not to have a mortgage. So he did everything himself. He built the cabin himself, and I was still working, and he was working 60 plus hours a week at his job. He was overnight all the time for work. I didn't mention that before, but that was actually something that was pretty stressful with him working there was the overnights that he had to do constantly, and then I'm home with the kids. And it was the financial aspect of our marriage was hard, trying to make ends meet. And I had debt from school and mortgage and paying for the land and everything. It was a tough time.
Sure. So he was working overnights and farming at the
Hmm.
same time.
Yeah, so he would work Monday through Friday at Scenic, and then when he got home on Fridays, we would pack up all of our stuff and we would drive up to the land, and then he would do some project. Usually he would do farming with his dad. They were trying to build the herd up so that Aaron could eventually take on some of the cattle at our new place there. So his dad needed a lot more help with the farming aspect. So yeah, he was working around the clock. Aaron was a person that seemed like he needed to work all the time. If he wasn't working, he wasn't content. That was one thing that was a struggle with our marriage was it was hard for him to relax.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I was going to ask, yeah, with him working, so many hours that it doesn't leave a whole lot of time for just you two, right? Especially since you have two kids, especially since you guys are kind of, moving, to a different location, so much stuff going on. Yeah. How did that affect your guys' relationship?
That the few years leading up to his passing were hard. because I didn't feel like he saw the kids very much. And I didn't feel like I had very much help with taking care of them because, like I said, he was working so much. And then when he was home on the weekends, he was doing a project. He built things. He built trailers. He built railings. He built countless things all the time. He just had to be doing stuff all the time. And it was hard for me. I think it was ingrained in him as a child that work was like where he found value. I don't know. It was just ingrained in him, and he loved working with his hands, but it was hard when we would try to hang out with friends, or we would go visit my parents, or we would go to family functions. He was always wanted to get out of there so he could get home to work on his project. And he was always trying to rush and get us out of there so he could go work. I don't know. It was just so hard for him to relax. And yeah, that was really hard. That was hard on our marriage. That was one of the hardest things.
Yeah. Yeah. I can definitely understand how that was, difficult and stressful. And, obviously starting off your book, you kind of start at the beginning of the construction of your guys' home. As you mentioned, Aaron very much wanted to be debt free. And, he enjoyed building with his hands. And so eventually, from what the book says is that you guys decided to, hey, let's build a house now.
Yeah.
And so kind of walk us through that. You guys were living in this log cabin. At what point did you guys decide, okay, we need maybe more room. We need an actual house instead of a cabin now?
Mm-hmm. Well, the cabin was built for me. He told me he built the cabin for me so that when he was working with his dad on the weekends, I would have somewhere to be, and we didn't have to stay with his dad every single weekend. So after doing that for a couple summers, we moved in with his mom, and then we were saving money living there. So we saved up enough to start on it. So that was that. Yeah, we had enough money to get a good chunk of it done without having any debt.
Sure.
So.
Sure. And, this is obviously the major point of your story up to this point now, Stephanie, is Aaron and his dad were working on the home, and kind of walk us through what kind of happened.
So we started the work on the house in April of 2019. And then, yeah, we were up there every single weekend, just about every weekend working on it. And in September, Aaron was trying to decide. So there was a well on the property, but it was quite a ways away, and it was an old well. And so he was trying to decide, well, should we save money and trench a line from that well over to the house? Because it was probably a football field's length away from the house, which is a big project, trying to trench that and bring a pipe over.
Yeah.
Or should we hire someone? It's going to cost triple the amount to put in a brand new well. And so there were those discussions, and obviously it was decided to trench the well from that distance away to the house. And it just so happened that weekend on September 7th was a Saturday that his dad had an excavator. A friend loaned it to him. He had the opportunity to use it. So that was the weekend that they decided, okay, we're going to do it this weekend, rain or shine, we have to get it done because this is when we have the excavator. So unfortunately that day it was raining on and off, and the house itself was on a gravel pad. So, we had the shell of the house finished and like the concrete was in and everything. So we needed to get the water run to it. All the plumbing was in. We needed to get it done before winter so we could get the plumbing winterized, I guess. So he started early on September 7th at 7 or so in the morning, maybe even earlier. And him and I went out to grab some supplies in a nearby town for the well, some piping parts he needed. And we stopped and we grabbed a coffee on the way home from that. And I remember we drove over to his dad's house and picked up another tool he needed for completing the project. So we did that probably mid-morning. And then he and his dad got started or continued on with it throughout the day. They came in for lunch probably around noon or 1. And then I didn't see him or talk to him anymore after that. So the last time I actually talked to him was lunchtime. So it was about 6:30 or so when I had been wanting to get out for a walk, and the rain had cleared at that point. So I took the kids out on the stroller, and it was kind of a mess. They were obviously digging a trench from way far away. So the trench itself it went through the driveway of the property. So I had to try to make my way over this trench and get the kids out on the road for a walk. And when I was leaving, I walked by them, and Aaron was, he looked very stressed. I remember that morning, he just seemed really uptight and nervous and uneasy. It was like he had a bad feeling about the whole thing. And that wasn't like him. He was usually pretty confident in what he was doing. But I think the fact that they were working with such huge machinery and they didn't have a permit, they weren't experts on what they were doing. They just were, really wanting to save money and do it themselves. And I think it made him nervous, like he had never done it before. So he felt nervous about it. And I didn't even notice that until at the aftermath, because Aaron was always so confident with what he did. I just trusted him. I just trusted that he knew what he was doing and I didn't have anything to worry about. But now looking back, I think like he was nervous and he knew that something was off, I think, with the rain and everything. So anyway, I left, went down the driveway and went for a walk with the kids. And then it started to get dark. So at about 7 o'clock, I turned around and, excuse me, I I heard a noise. I wrote this in my book, but I heard a noise. It sounded like a bird. And I remember it so clearly. It was like a squawking noise and it was very curious. It was high pitched, and as the closer I got to our home, the louder it got. And my daughter asked me, "What is that noise, Mom?" And I said, "I don't know. It sounds like a bird." And then I got closer and I noticed it was a human making the noise. And then as I got closer, I realized it was Lyle, Aaron's dad. And he was like pulling his hair and pacing back and forth right next to the excavator. And I remember as I was walking back, I heard that the excavator had been turned off. And I thought that was curious because they weren't done yet. So when I got to the driveway, I realized, okay, something's happened to Aaron. It's not Aaron making the noise. So I raced down the driveway with my kids, and I was thinking to myself, well, okay, it's okay, Stephanie, don't panic. You have kids here with you. You have to keep it together for them. To keep it together. So thankfully, because there was that trench, there was a huge pile of gravel blocking the view from the kids. So they had no idea what was going on. They were 3 and 1. They were so little anyway. So I said, well, Sylvie is pretty mature for her age. I told her, I said, just stay here. Mommy will be right back. And I strapped Lad in the seat in the stroller. And so I ran over and I saw Aaron laying on the ground, and it was a very brief, like I couldn't look for more than a second. And and his dad was totally incoherent. He was gasping for air and screaming and yelling and just totally out of his mind, panicking. So I knew that he obviously had not called anybody. He was out of his mind. So I raced over to the cabin and I couldn't find my phone. So I ran back and I got my kids and we ran down the driveway. And I ran to my neighbor's house, who I actually had never met. We had never really introduced ourselves before this. But I ran up their driveway and a husband came to the door and I said, "There's been an accident with an excavator. Can you call 911?" So he did, and they eventually made it out there at about 8 o'clock. And I was waiting in the house for, during that hour, and I didn't hear from Lyle, and it was quite a long wait before I heard from the EMT. During that time, that hour long stint of time, I mean, I pretty much knew Aaron was gone from the way that he looked, but I didn't know for sure. So I still had an inkling of hope. But I took that time and I put my kids to bed in their house because I had nowhere else to go. So they were great people. They were Christians. They were loving, sweet people. And they had two little kids of their own. And I put them to bed in their bunk beds.
Wow.
And I read to them and sang them songs, and all the while knowing that their dad was probably dead. And it was very surreal moments. So then after I got them in bed, that's when the EMT came in, and he stood at the door and he said, "I'm sorry for your loss." That's all he said. And I was out on their front step and I shut the door, and I remember going in a ball to my knees and just like rocking back and forth. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I just kept saying that, like, because I couldn't function in that moment. And then the EMT, he was a believer, and he touched my back and he said, "I don't know what you believe, but this scripture verse might be helpful to you." And he said, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And I feel like he was an angel, because that was like a moment that changed my life. Like I, after he said that, I thought to myself that I needed to pray. Like it was like God told me, "You need to pray, Stephanie, right now." So I just prayed, "God, I'm gonna use this. Please help me. Give me your strength. I don't know how to do this without you. I don't know why this happened, but please help me." And I remember saying that I prayed for quite a long time, and they were standing there listening to me, and there were two people there, and the woman that was there with this EMT, she was just bawling and crying, and I just remember saying, "I'm going to use this for your glory, Lord. Like, I don't know why it happened, but help me to use it for your glory." And so then after I prayed, I just felt like God put strength in me that it was not mine. And he just, that whole evening, somehow he gave me the strength to get through it. And so I went back inside, and those people, her name's Becky. She's a good friend of mine now. She's the neighbor. She called up her pastors, and they came out to their house that whole night. And two of them, they were hugging me and holding me and talking me through it and keeping me breathing. And it was just an amazing thing that God God knew what I needed. He sent me his angels to rescue me in that moment. And they actually, the pastors of that church, they knew the pastor of my church. And so my pastor called me and talked me through it as well. And so I'm just so thankful that I have a church family, because I don't know how people do it without having a church family when they go through grief like that and such trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, I can't even fathom, just what that moment was like for you, Stephanie, and just the flood of emotions that come over you while, like you said, also, kind of simultaneously trying to keep yourself somewhat together for the sake of the kids. I mean, obviously they were young, but like,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't want to panic them, and so much going on in that moment. And yeah, God, even in the midst of the most traumatic and horrible experience of your life, look at how God provided for you, right? The
Yeah.
people that he surrounded you with. And, nothing happens by coincidence. It was no coincidence that
Yeah.
those were your neighbors, that they were believers, that, their pastors knew your pastors. So, man, it just goes to show the love that our Father has for us, even in our darkest moments, that he is with us, and he truly is working all things for good. And man, Stephanie, you, throughout your book, I mean, you're sharing your journal entries during this time of everything that you're going through, and walk us through. I mean, the days, the weeks after that accident, the funeral, what did that look like for you? How did you get through those first few days, those first few weeks?
Um, I felt like I was floating. Like I had, it was surreal. Like I felt like I was living an out of body experience. Like angels were carrying me. Like I had countless people telling me, I'm praying for you. And I definitely could feel it. Like it was a spiritual existence. I felt like I was living on a different wavelength than everyone else around me. It was very surreal. Um, it was like, I don't know how else to describe it. I had lots and lots of people reaching out to me, and my MOPS group at church, they surrounded me with their love and support. My church, they did so many things. I could tell you so many things. I could talk for hours about the different things that happened, but the funeral was super. It was just a incredible experience in that I knew that there was a reason why God had allowed Aaron to die, but I didn't understand what it was up until the funeral. Um, I remember planning it and just kind of being able to make decisions and being able to say, yep, we're going to do this song. I want you to talk about this. I want to do this at this point in the funeral. And I just felt like I had a confidence to make those decisions somehow. I don't know how, because I'm not that person usually. I usually can't make up my mind very easily. So we did a lot of I played the violin at his funeral and I gave the eulogy. I I know that Aaron, one of the things he worked with a lot of blue collar men at his job, and he was probably the only believer there. And he would stay overnight with these men. A lot of them were drinkers, partiers, cussing around Aaron a lot, and he didn't like it, but he did like the fact that he could share the gospel with them. And some of his friends I didn't know where they were standing in their faith either. So I knew that there was a reason, for Aaron's life and where he was at and why God had him where he was. And so actually in my book, the chapter that says Dear Aaron, that's the eulogy that I spoke at his funeral. That's what I said. So I wanted to share with all of these people that were at the funeral about Aaron and what why he was the way that he was, why he had such high character, and why he was such a great employee, and why he was generous and patient and such a hard worker. It was because of God and his relationship with Jesus, because he wanted to live his life in a way that was pleasing to the Lord, and he loved people. And so at his funeral, I said all of this, and I told my pastor, I want you to do an altar call, and I want you to, invite people into having a relationship with Jesus. And when he did that, he said to me, Stephanie, I want you to turn around and look at all of these people raising their hands that have given their lives to the Lord. And so many hands went up. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. It's not something you see at a normal funeral. So, and then I remember walking out of the funeral, following his casket, and just like having an epiphany moment. Like, this is why we're here. Like, we're not just randomly here on this earth. Like, God puts us here for a purpose. And God had him there. He didn't want to be where he was at his workplace. He did not like his job because of the hours, but he was having an impact, a big one.
Yeah.
And he didn't know it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. I can't imagine. I mean, none of us know exactly what we're able to see once we're in heaven, right? But I gotta believe that God let Aaron in that moment see what was happening at his funeral, and seeing the hands
yeah.
being raised and the hearts being changed and transformed in that moment. And I can't imagine the pure joy that he felt, being able to
Yeah.
see that. And like you said, even for you, I mean, to be able to, see that, pain has a purpose, right? When you're a believer, when you're living for God, pain has a purpose. And the pain that you went through, part of that purpose was, again, as an invitation for those that worked with Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
and whoever else, was at the funeral, that gave their lives to the Lord, to not leave that building without knowing that, hey, they can see him again, that they can spend eternity,
Yeah.
not just with him, but with their heavenly Father, who loves them so much that he was willing to die for them. Right. And so I in the midst of the heaviness of that day, the grief, I gotta imagine that was quite the boost for you there. I mean, like you said, you kind of had that epiphany of like, man,
Mm-hmm.
this is why we're here. We're here to point
Yeah.
others towards Jesus. Like, bottom line, that's what our
Yeah.
lives are here for, right? To just be
Yeah.
living representations of Jesus so that others may know him as well. And so you get through that day. And I know, just going through some of my family members' funerals, it's those days after, it's the weeks after the funeral that sometimes can be even more difficult, because you know someone passes, you kind of go into like this work mode of, we got to get the funeral, together and get all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff taken care of. And then once that's all done, as time goes on, maybe people don't check in as often as they do, and life
Mm-hmm.
kind of returns to a new normal for you now. And so what was that like in the kind of those first few weeks and months after the funeral, of it really being like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now it's me, I'm a widow in my early 30s with two kids. What was that like for you?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, like you said, like
after he passed, it was a solid month of trying to get everything together with finances and insurance and everything, getting all that settled after someone dies. It's like, it's almost cruel because I had no time to think or process anything that was going on. So I was actually really relieved when that time was done so that I could sit down and process and actually breathe and start to heal. So I 26 days after he passed, I joined grief support because I was like, I need help as soon as possible. I don't want to sit in this forever, and I want to be healed. So how I just wanted to know how to get that healing. I didn't want to put it off because I was a stay-at-home mom, and I needed to be functioning for my kids. They were 1 and 3, and I had to function for them, and I had to be a parent, and I had to be strong for them. So I needed to be in my right mind. So um, it was it was great in a way that I had a beautiful place to live. I shared this in my book that I didn't go back living with his mother. Through miraculous intervention, God set me up in a cabin on a resort in Richmond, Minnesota, and it was a beautiful place. It was like on the lake. The owners of the resort were just beautiful people, and they had kids. My kids loved playing with their kids. Um, and I had people come and shovel snow for me. Their kids would come and shovel snow for me. People would stop by and bring me meals. And I met some of my very best friends now in that cabin. People that I didn't really know before he passed. I got to be really good friends with because I thought, well, these are the kind of people that I want to be my friend, because these are the people that are actually coming and taking time out of their day and bringing me food, and they don't even know me. So yeah, I want to be your friend. Um, so I actually made some really wonderful friendships during that time, and it was really hard, but it was also kind of beautiful in a way because I was super close to the Lord, and his spirit was just totally around me all the time. I could feel his angels, I could feel his presence. So I say this in the book, like I kind of miss that in a way, because once I started to heal and things got back to normal, that kind of faded a little bit. They say pain is what grows you the most in your faith, and um, hard things are what grow your faith. And so I grew a lot in my faith with the Lord,
Yeah.
a lot during
That's
that
amazing.
time.
And I want to publicly give a shout out to Joe and Christina DeRose with Riverside Resorts there in
Yes.
Richmond, because obviously that's who you're talking about. And
Yes.
amazing people. They I know have done that for other people as well, and they don't do it, for the
Mm-hmm.
attention, for anything to do with them. They're doing it because they love people, they love God, and
Yeah.
they're amazing people. Riverside Resort is amazing, so I just want to publicly shout them out, just
Yes.
for them being them, an amazing couple, an
Yeah.
amazing family, and that's awesome how God really brought them into your life and used them during
Yeah.
that time for you. Man, what a godsend. I mean, a
Yeah.
literal godsend. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Stephanie, again, in your book, I mean, these are literally your diary entries, right? And so
Mhm.
I don't want to give too much away because I want people to go out and buy the book and read it
Yeah.
and support you. But I'm wondering, Stephanie, as you moved through the grief process, you mentioned you went to grief share, different grief
Mhm.
groups. What are maybe some of the main things that you learned in those groups that helped you to get through the aftermath of Aaron's passing?
Mhm. I would say Not to isolate is one thing. You know, when you lose someone, you are in such a different place than most people, and I think a lot of people think that they can do it on their own, and that they can find a way to navigate this grief on their own. But I think isolating is one of the worst things that you can do, because you need help, you need support when you're struggling with such trauma. I mean, any kind of community that you can get is so important. And then I learned about doing the hard things is what helps you heal. So one of the things I did was every day I made a plan of doing a hard thing. So I would go to Menards, which was one of his favorite stores, and I would stand in the middle of Menards and I would just cry. I can't tell you how many times it took me after going back to Menards before I was able to not cry. I went to his workplace and I stood where he worked every day, and I walked through his routine, and I talked to his coworkers about what he did, and about the work that he completed, and they showed me different projects he worked on. I went to different restaurants that we had been to a lot, some of our regular places that we had gone to. I read through our text messages, and it was hard. But the more that you do those things, the more and more you do them, the easier it becomes. And then when you do start to reintegrate yourself into the world, it's not so difficult anymore, because you don't have to be shocked by the trauma of those circumstances happening to you without you knowing it. Like songs that Aaron loved, I would listen to. Uh, Different things like that. It was hard, but it was necessary. Sometimes something would happen, and I called it like an ambush moment, where a memory would happen and I would just fall apart. I would just start crying and like fall down on the ground. Um, and I couldn't live my life like that forever. So I knew I needed to get through those hard moments over and over again so they would become easier for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, again, going back to what I said earlier, like your ability to want to grow, your desire to want to grow and to challenge yourself, to stretch yourself. I mean, that's a quality God put in you that, man, really, it seems like came in handy for you in that moment. Like you said, it was hard, but you still pushed
Yeah.
yourself to do it. And obviously you had, an amazing support system around you as well, helping you with
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I'm just super impressed at you doing that. I work with clients where it's been years since their loved one passed, and they still haven't even gone through their loved ones things. They're still where they are, and not saying that that's necessarily bad, but it's just again, I think that just goes to show that, yeah, like you said, like you acknowledged that you know uh, the cruel reality of death is that life still goes on for the rest of us, right? And you knew that, hey,
Yeah.
I still have to move on, my kids need me to move on as well, I need to be healthy, I need to be whole. And that's what you did. And so kudos to you, Stephanie, for continuing, not only making that choice, but continuing to make that choice when it probably would have been easy to just be like, nah, I don't want to do that today, I don't want to have to face
Yeah.
this today, I don't want to have to deal with that today.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Stephanie, your book kind of ends in, I think around the year mark, right, of Aaron's passing.
Hmm. Yep.
And again, guys, and I'll attach the links and everything for it so you can find it easily. But one of the things that I thought was super refreshing hearing you write about in the book was how you had went out on a date. after Aaron's passing, like that first date. And I love how you spoke to that, because that is one of the most common things I get asked about when I'm working with someone who is dealing with, the loss of their spouse, the loss of their partner, is, that whole idea of dating again. How do I know when I'm ready? Where do I even go, to find people to date now, and just all these things, all these questions. And so, you talked about your first date experience after Aaron's passing. When did you know, Stephanie, that, okay, like I'm at a spot where I am ready to date, where I am ready to, look for someone to choose to do life with, post Aaron?
Mhm. When did I know? This might sound crazy, but I remember like I had, days and days of going through my routine alone with my kids, putting them to bed on my own, grocery shopping on my own, family functions on my own, just all these things by myself. And it was really hard going through all these motions on my own, like getting my car fixed, all the different things that Aaron used to do. Like it, I would just ask God, how long, Lord? How long do you want me to be alone? How long is this going to last? And, I had been super intentional those first 6 months of Aaron's passing. And um, I, there's a difference between somebody getting divorced and having that. There's a different, it's similar, but it's a different type of trauma. When you're divorced, there's hard feelings, there's hurt that you need to heal from. And with Aaron, like I was still madly in love with him. I had no ill feelings towards him whatsoever. So I knew that I needed to be able to separate. Like I knew that I had to, like God would give me the ability to separate my love for Aaron for someone else. But I knew that my love for him was never going to go away, no matter how long it was. So even if I waited longer, like my love for him was never going to stop. And to this day, I mean, I love him the same and I miss him the same. And that will never stop.
Yeah.
So I remember sitting down one time, putting Lad to bed, and it had been a really hard day. And with the kids, his behavior and just being alone and trying to handle their behaviors. Like Aaron was so good with handling their behaviors. He just knew like discipline things. He just knew how to do it. And I have a shorter fuse, and I was really struggling that day. And I remember talking to the Lord and being like, Lord, how long? How long? And I don't know if it was me, but I feel like he said, this week, you're going to meet someone. And that was 7 months after Aaron passed away. It was not, it was very soon. And I realized that. And a lot of people were not super happy with my decision and, being open to that at that point. But like I said, I still was, my love for him never changed. He was just not there. He was gone, and I was alone and I was struggling. And I don't know. I felt like I didn't deserve the loss that I had gone through. And I had never intended on divorcing him. I, I don't know. I just felt like it was okay for me to make that choice to find someone else. And I still grieved even after I met my husband, my now husband. His name is James. And I still grieved while I knew him, and it was part of our relationship. And we have a beautiful marriage and beautiful children. And it's not always easy, but it's been really beautiful. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
amazing. So did you meet James that week then, the week that the Lord spoke to?
Yes, I did. I did.
Uh,
I did. So I knew that was the Lord.
yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So how did you meet James?
Well, I met James online. But, that's not always easy either, because you have to be real picky when you're a Christian, when you're meeting people online.
Yep.
So I was very picky with anyone I would talk to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you guys build that relationship? Kind of walk us through, like you said, even to this day, you still grieve Aaron, you still love
Mhm.
Aaron. And so what did that look like, kind of, getting into another serious relationship while still balancing those emotions with Aaron?
Mhm. I it was super exciting at the time. Any new relationship is exciting, but it's also like it was just kind of strange, I think, for James as well, like dealing with my grief and knowing like um I still love Aaron. I don't know how he coped with it. But knowing James, like he's just so go with the flow, easygoing, really sweet and understanding. He's very laid back, and he's very patient, incredibly patient. Um, so I needed that type of person to be willing to deal with my emotions and my grieving. And he was super patient with me, and not pushy at all with anything. And God knew the type of person I needed. So
Yeah.
the kids, he has a daughter who's a year older than my oldest, and so her and Sylvie, her name is Blair and Sylvie, they're like best friends, and they were immediate best friends. And so that was really good for Sylvie, because she's such an introvert and Blair's an extrovert, and they clicked immediately and they loved hanging out. And that was really fun when we finally introduced the kids. It wasn't right away. But when we finally did, they really enjoyed hanging out together. So
Wow,
yeah.
that's awesome. I mean, yeah, God obviously ordained this whole thing, and so he knew exactly what you needed, not
Yeah.
just in another husband, but just in now a blended family, right? And
Yes.
he knew what Sylvie needed. And so one thing that stands out to me is that it seems like the Lord moves quickly in your life, right? Like once he puts someone in there, boom, we're kind of off to the races. Aaron date in January, engaged 6 months later, married 2 months later, right?
Yeah.
James, 7 months um, after Aaron's passing. And by the way, I have yet to come across a book that actually has the rules for how long you need to wait when your spouse dies to start dating again, right? So
Yeah.
people, let's just give those people a break, right? You're not in their position, you're not in their shoes,
Yeah.
and yeah, especially if they're a believer, let's trust that they're following after the Lord. And so you meet James 7 months after Aaron's passing. How long after that did you guys get married?
That was quick too.
Yep.
We wanted to do things the right way. So yeah, we got married in October of 2020. So that was a little more than a year after Aaron died. Um, so yeah, it was pretty quick.
Yeah. How did you, Stephanie, you mentioned not everybody was happy with how, quote unquote, quickly you moved on, from Aaron, and not putting anybody on blast or anything like that, but how did you kind of cope with that? How did you deal with that as you're hearing comments either directly or through the grapevine? How did you cope with that to just focus on what God was calling you to do?
Well, this is a neat story too, because I through the radio station, I shared my story on there for one of their fundraisers. And one of the listeners, her name is Dawn, she contacted me because she heard my story, and she also was a widow. And she had lost her husband in her 30s, and she had two young kids with him. And she remarried a year after her husband died. So I got to be her friend, and this was before I met James. And she told me her story, and she told me how hard it was, but that she just knew that this was the person that God had for her. And so I think like I coped because of partly because of her reassurance to me, like, you know, people aren't in your shoes. They don't know what it feels like to be a widow when you're 30 years old. And you just have to trust the Lord and trust your gut. Um, and so it was partly that. And then part of it I didn't handle always the right way because I did a lot of avoiding. I I eloped. James and I eloped. Um, I didn't want to have a big wedding because I was nervous about if it would hurt people. And I didn't even know who to invite. I didn't know if I could even invite any of my friends that I had with Aaron or his family or anyone or my family because they were still grieving Aaron. And so we just made the decision to have our parents at our wedding. And I don't know if that was the right thing to do or not, but at the time it was the easiest thing. And I just felt like people would understand as time passes and as they got to know James, they would understand. So,
Sure. Sure. Yeah. And you mentioned the radio story. You wrote about that in the book. Again, I don't want to give that one away. People, you need to go out and buy the book and read that for yourselves because that was an incredible story of just how God,
yeah.
man, God is just in the details of everything. I'll just leave it at that. And so, yeah, here you and James you brought two kids into the marriage. He brought one kid into the marriage. And what does life look like for you guys now?
hmm Yeah. So we have a 9-year old, 8-year old, 6-year old, and a 1.5-year old. So we're very busy. I don't know if you can hear my daughter crying in the background right now, but um, it's just a juggling act right now. And it's a beautiful, and I'll be honest, it's not easy being in a blended family. I'm sure you've come across that as a therapist.
Mhm.
I feel like we probably could use a little bit more help trying to figure out how to blend well. I've read a lot of books from Ron Deal, the blended family books, and it's hard when you're not the biological parent to show everyone the same love and treatment. But I work on it and I pray about it every single day. And it's something that I have to work on. Everyone has to work on constantly because it's not easy. But I absolutely love James's family. He has such sweet relatives and they've really taken us in. And it's not easy for the extended family on Aaron's side either, but it seems like everyone really makes it work and gets along well. And we have a really great story compared to lots of blended families, I think. Like, I know God's in the middle of it all. He answers my prayers and he helps me love when I don't feel like I have any love, and he helps me um, get through each day when I don't feel like I can. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
man, praise God. Praise God.
Mhm.
So, Stephanie, A Widow's Diary, Grief Hurts, but God Heals. You talked about it kind of way at the beginning, just kind of, why you started journaling and, just, maybe the hopes of one day being able to just kind of help people know how to talk to someone who's in grieving, which I love. I mean, because that's something that I think a lot of people have good intentions, in trying to support people after, they're experiencing the loss of someone, but sometimes the things that they say just don't come out right, or it's not the right timing.
Yeah.
And so, Stephanie, tell us a little bit more about your book as far as what was it like for you, going back and collecting these old journal entries, putting them together in a book. What do you hope this book accomplishes?
Mhm. Well, um, when I was putting it together, again, it brought up a lot of emotions because I hadn't read those posts in 4 years. So there were actually many nights when I would wake up crying, having dreams of Aaron. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good for me to feel those things and relive those emotions because I do still love him very much. But I wrote it because I wanted my pain to have purpose. I know when Aaron passed away, the first thing that I thought was I need to talk to somebody that has gone through this so that they can tell me that I'm going to be okay and that I'm going to survive. And so I wanted this book to be that for someone else who is feeling the same thing, because there's a lot of people that do. So I think there's, like I said before, there's something strangely comforting about reading someone else's pain and reading how they process it, and that can hopefully be helpful to someone else to process theirs as well. So
Yeah.
that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for doing it, because, as I wrote in the review for your book, it's one thing to read about someone's grief journey after they've kind of gone through it and gotten over those big hurdles. It's another thing to like really see and feel what that person is going through as they're going through it, which is what you're giving us as readers the privilege of being able to do. I mean, these are your diary entries, something very
Mm-hmm.
personal, very real, very raw, very vulnerable. And you are choosing to share these, with the world, because of the reasons you just stated. And I just think it's amazing. It's awesome what you're doing. And I'm sure God is already using it and blessing people with it. But I mean, until he comes back, this book is going to be in circulation. And so you'll never know, probably until heaven, Stephanie, just how many people
Mm-hmm.
were impacted by your story. Kind of what we were talking about, with Aaron at the funeral, right? Like, all
Yeah.
the people that, read your book, that listen to this interview, whatever it is, like, are going to be impacted because of your choice to, like you said, give your pain a purpose. And what better
Yeah.
way to give it a purpose than to glorify God through it all, which is another thing that stood out to me throughout your journal entries, is just that relationship with God. Like, that was your anchor. Like, I think you said earlier, like, I don't know how people get through grief without God, without
Yeah.
knowing that that the comforter, that the Holy Spirit is in you and with you. And so I just love and respect so much, Stephanie, what you did with this book. Where can people go to purchase this?
Mm-hmm. It's on Amazon right now. So if you Google or look up on Amazon, A Widow's Diary, Grief Hurts, but God Heals, it should show up. Right now, I just have paperback, but an ebook is coming soon. So,
Oh, exciting. Awesome. I'll make sure to put a link directly to the Amazon link there in the show notes, so that you guys can just very easily go buy it. Once you buy it, leave a review, let others know how Stephanie's story has impacted you, has helped you. Man, Stephanie, this has been great. Like I said, just getting to meet you and getting to talk with you in person. We've, exchanged some emails, and we're gonna have to meet at
yes.
church, one of these Sundays. We'll have to bump into each other. But my final question for you, Stephanie, is, as you look back at your story and you just see the goodness of God through it all, like, what comes to mind as you just think about God's goodness towards you?
Mm-hmm. The first thing that comes to mind is that, I didn't put this in my book because I was kind of afraid of sounding preachy, but in order to have like this kind of healing, when you go through this kind of trauma, you have to be willing to surrender. You can't just achieve this kind of healing that I did, or anybody, without surrendering everything to God. So if you have something that's getting in the way of your relationship with Him, whether it be an addiction or sin that you need to repent of, if there is shame that's getting in the way, this can't be achieved. And so it requires total surrender.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to note that is God, there's a scripture verse I read, King David, he said, if I had cherished sin in my heart, God would have done nothing for me. God could have done nothing for me. And so that hit me really hard when I read that it requires something from us as well in order for God to be able to do that, to heal us, to heal our wounds. So,
Yeah. And that's a good word. That's a great word. Yeah, it is. It is about surrender, letting go of control and just fully trusting God with every single facet of your
yeah,
life, of your being, and, giving him, the room to move. God's a gentleman, right? He's never going to force his way into your life. Like we have to be able to be willing to surrender it and to accept his offer and, invite him in. And it's clear that you have done that, Stephanie.
thank
I'm,
you.
again, I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to know you more. Your love for the Lord is evident, not even just reading your book, but just talking to you. And um, what you have, like I said, what you have chosen to do through your pain is super admirable. And I just bless you, and I bless your book, and I bless the ways that the Lord is going to continue to use you and James and even your guys' kids to just love on people and to meet people where they're at, whether it's their grief journeys or whatever else they have going on in their lives. Like I know, man, God's just getting started with you, Steph. So be encouraged, and thank you so much again for being willing to come on the show.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed our talk very much.